Howdy everyone, welcome back to the Disc Barn. Tonight I'm very excited to be talking about Boston Manor's new album, Datura. The Blackpool Quintet are back with a full album only a year after the Desperate Times, Desperate Pleasures EP, which I really enjoyed. I'm always excited to hear new music from Boston Manor, but I can't say I was super looking forward to Datura, mainly because of its rollout and presentation and pitching from the band. Everything about this said it was an album, although this could have very easily been an EP. Apparently, this is only a part one of a two-part album series of Boston Manor that they're calling a concept album. And they're charging beyond full price for a vinyl record of this thing. You can see behind me, I've got Glue. I was a huge fan of Glue. I've also got Be Nothing and Welcome to the Neighborhood on CD, two albums I really love. And I bought all of those at a Boston Manor concert that they headlined in Phoenix, which I really enjoyed. And I thought Boston Manor put on a hell of a show, and I would go see them again in a heartbeat. Before I get into what I think of this album, I just want to say how I feel about the presentation of this album as a whole. Boston Manor is no longer on Pure Noise. I don't know what their financial situation is with the split that they're getting from Sharptooth Records. However, they are charging absurd prices for this vinyl on their website. And it's only for 7 songs. Granted, it is 26 minutes, but we had already heard 3 of those singles. We've heard Foxglove before, we've heard Passenger before, and I think we got Crocus was the other one that we got. That's already tough to swallow when you're going to charge $30 for a full album. A big portion of the rest of the album is an instrumental, and the other song is an intro. A very good intro, but it very much feels like an introduction. It's not a full song. So I'm glad I didn't pre-order this on vinyl. I almost did. I literally was on their website with the intention of pre-ordering this vinyl until I saw the price and the number of songs. If I would have spent 30 or 40 bucks to pre-order this record on vinyl, when it arrived, I would have felt very ripped off, to be honest. But enough of that. Regardless of how I feel about the value that this album's bringing to the table, let's set aside the price of this thing and let's just look at the songs and the content of Datura. And let's just talk about Datura as a piece of art from Boston Manor. It's 7 songs of what they've said is a concept album, and you can really feel that, especially because of the introduction track. It's called Datura Dusk, is in parentheses. Kind of pretentious, whatever. Concept records, I think, are always going to be pretentious, but luckily they pull off the record. It's not a pretentious record that fails and is embarrassing. Datura Dusk really sets the tone. It's almost cheating to have rainfall sound effects in the background because it immediately pulls you into like dystopian, dark kind of vibes. And those kind of feelings and those emotions really connect with Henry Cox's voice. It really connects with the instrumentation here. One of the reasons that feels so natural, and one of the reasons that those sound effects really fit with the vocals and the instrumentation, is that Boston Manor, even before this, has had a very steampunk, cyberpunk kind of sound. Sometimes you get Henry Cox's vocals that have a lot of post-processing to them. They don't sound supernatural, but other times they are really raw. And if you see him live, you'll know those moments really well. He sounds great live. Like, the post-processing on Henry Cox's vocals definitely is not a crutch. What I'm trying to say is that the emotions that Datura is trying to bring forward from the listener feel very genuine. They don't feel forced, and they fit very naturally with this band, with Boston Manor. And I think it's a good direction. It's a smart direction for sure. And when I heard this the first time, I was super excited to hear the rest of the album in its entirety as a whole, even though I'd already heard the 3 singles. So there wasn't much new for me to hear. But I was willing to give that a pass. And after hearing Datura, I was really enthralled in what they were going for. And I was excited to see what was coming on this album. The last couple seconds of the introductory song Datura feed into the song Floodlights on the Square. Literally reminds me of the initial teaser trailer of Cyberpunk 2077. And the way I describe Floodlights is it's an amalgamation of what Boston Manor has been doing the last couple of years. I don't know if I would even call it an evolution of Boston Manor. It's just more of what they've been doing. Very effective, very competent track. And it doesn't really have a hook. I mean, Boston Manor really isn't pop punk, and they haven't been for a long time. So they're not going to be tied to catchy hooks or crowd pleasing choruses. And this really doesn't have one of those at all. What it is a very atmospheric track. It fits the core of this album, advances the themes of this album. Floodlights in the Square feels very synthetic. You've got a lot going on in Henry Cox's vocals. There's not a ton of drums going on here. It doesn't feel like a band. I'm very interested to hear what this would sound like live, because I don't know quite how they're going to pull it off, because the only thing that I can hear live would be Henry Cox's vocals, and I don't know how the rest of the band even fits into Boston Manor anymore. It feels like they're getting phased out. This isn't a song that's going to stand out in Boston Manor's discography, but it fits in Datura really well, and I think this is a good song on the album. And this leads into the middle of the album with Foxglove and Passenger, two singles that we've heard before. They're very radio rock heavy, going to get the fans excited. These are going to be a lot of fun to hear live, and they're kind of standard Boston Manor songs. They feel right at home on Glue. You get inklings of this on Welcome to the Neighborhood. This is what Boston Manor has been leading towards. Again, this isn't really an evolution of Boston Manor, but lyrically and sonically, this fits perfectly on Datura. I don't know if they were trying to go for a cyberpunk, steampunk, post-apocalyptic vibe. That's what I get from this record. And if they were going for that, I think they nailed it. The sounds that they've achieved here, the effects on Henry Cox's vocals, that album art, the single artwork, it makes me feel like it's night, it's dirty, it's raining, and I really like it. I think they achieved something really cool here. And these two songs are the fun part of the album, and shows that even though it's that gritty, it can still produce some really fun songs. And then we get into the next song, Crocus, which I think is a really great song on its own. But what hinders it and what it suffers from is following two singles that sound very similar. I can see how, if you scrambled the listening, I would say the same thing about Foxglove if it was the third song in the trio of those three radio singles. And this, to me, just shows how important track placement is and song diversity is on an album, because when I'm sitting here listening to the whole thing all the way through, Crocus makes me want to reach for the skip button, even though I think it's a good song on its own. So I'm not going to knock points for it as a song. I will say that it's a disappointing and slow part on the album that makes me just want to get to the next song. And the next song, strangely, is another really slow moment on the album, but this one feels more purposeful, especially in a 7-song album that I feel maybe should have just been an EP. Shelter from the Rain is an instrumental, atmospheric interlude that fits great on this record and really adds to the feeling of this album as a whole. I think its inclusion is necessary here. It's very important to the whole feel of the album, and it only makes sense to have it there, and you're only going to enjoy it if you're listening to this from track 1 to track 7. Am I going to add this to a playlist? Would anybody add this to a playlist? Probably not. This makes it even stranger that they feel comfortable calling Datura an album. Over 10% of the record is instrumental. And then we get into the final song on the album, Inertia. This is the longest song by far. I think it's over 6 minutes long. This is a nightmarish track. Henry Cox's vocals shine here. Is this the best song on the album? I don't think so, but it's a great closer. It definitely leads into part 2 of this album, especially with the haunting and creepy chattering at the end of this song. And this makes for a final act of Datura. When you combine this with Shelter from the Rain, it becomes a really interesting string of 2 songs. In the end, I think Datura is an interesting album from a really special band. Boston Manor is clearly trying something different, both in their marketing and presentation of this album and in the music that they're creating. If you look at their album Be Nothing to where they are now, there's a huge change in what they've been creating. And Boston Manor is still frustrated that they're lumped in with pop punk bands. I don't see what's wrong with being lumped in pop punk bands. There's clearly a scene. They're touring with Trash Boat, I think they've toured with, they've toured with pop punk bands before. So that's, people like me who love pop punk like Boston Manor. Like Boston Manor brought me towards a different sound, a different style of music that I really enjoy. Without Boston Manor, I wouldn't listen to stuff like this. This would be completely outside of my wheelhouse. But because I saw them live with another band that I liked, because I listened to their first album and enjoyed it and gave their second album a chance, they brought in my taste in music. And for that, I'm always grateful to Boston Manor. And I'm always going to support them when they come on tour and buy their music physically when I can. I have a hard time figuring out where I place Datura in comparison to the rest of their discography. Be Nothing and Welcome to the Neighborhood and Glue felt humongous compared to this album. So I just can't even compare it. I'll be listening to this on streaming plenty. I think this is a fun listen. It's a good one to sit down and really pay attention to and read the lyrics. Henry Cox is super vulnerable in his lyrics, as always, so it's going to be a very personal listen, something you can empathize with emotionally and get a lot out of it listening. There's a lot going on in these songs. If you enjoyed this video at all, please give it a thumbs up and stay tuned because I've got more album reviews and discussions of pop punk and pop punk related projects like this one coming up very soon, and I hope to see you guys there. Until then, thank you guys. Bye.